87-year-old S.C. Orbach, founder of Orbach's clothing store of Oklahoma City, and his wife, 68-year-old Christine Orbach, were found murdered in their home at 2200 Northwest 56 about 3:15 this afternoon. Apparently, the groundskeeper and his grandson arrived at the house and noticed the doors open. They entered the house and found the Orbachs dead. Although we have no official word yet, it appears burglary may be a motive. Two of the Orbachs' cars are missing, a new blue Toronado and a blue Toyota station wagon. Mr. Orbach had recently retired from the clothing business. He and his wife, Christine, were planning to sell their home in Oklahoma City and move to a retirement home in Arkansas. To date, the strongest single piece of evidence is the victim's car, a 1981 four-door navy blue Toyota station wagon. The vehicle was found about 8 o'clock last night in the Penn Square Mall parking lot near Rothschild's. Police say witnesses spotted the car going into the shopping center about 11:30 yesterday morning. Investigators say they are in the process of putting together a possible description of the assailant. Today, the Oklahoma City Technical Investigation Unit canvassed the Orbach home and interviewed as many as 100 neighbors. The maintenance worker who found the bodies of 87-year-old Cyril Orbach and his wife Christine was back at the crime scene again today, going over the details of yesterday's murder. Although the physical evidence is mounting, the police say they are no closer at establishing a concrete motive.
The house, as you can see, is for sale. It could have been anyone that happened to stop by to look at the house. It could have been one of the doors that were left open and somebody just walked in. We found a couple of doors open in the residence when we got here. That is unlocked. So it's no. Just because there's no forced entry doesn't mean that it was someone I knew at all.
Longtime associate and friend Danny Weba says anyone that knew Cyril Orbach liked him, and he can't imagine anyone disliking him enough to commit murder.
The man could not have any enemies. I've known him. I was with him for 18 years. He gave me a chance in my business, and he was by far one of the most gentle, loving, diplomatic people I've ever met, and there's no way in the world he could have had an enemy.
Orbach founded the S.C. Orbach Company in 1933 with his wife and son. A store spokesman said Orbach had recently retired and was planning to move to a retirement home in Arkansas. He is survived by his only son, Robert. The Oklahoma City police have wrapped up at the crime scene at 2200 Northwest 56th, but officers say the investigation will continue for as long as it takes to catch the assailant. Military personnel stood guard today over the remains of their $3.5 million recreation facility. The building also housed the base linen exchange and arts and crafts center. 7 fire trucks, 5 from the base and 2 from the city of Altus, responded to the call about 9:15 Saturday night. Although firemen were able to contain the blaze to one building, they battled the fire well into the wee hours of the morning. The building was recently remodeled, including a new interior ceiling. Apparently, the fire started in the roof, and the new structure made it difficult for firefighters to get to the flames.
In these buildings, there was false ceilings, and the fire was trapped in between the ceilings and the roof, and it runs rampant up there. And to get through it, you've got to cut in, in various different places and try to track it down. And, a fire can outrun a fireman all day long. But as long as it's in those false ceilings, it's extremely hard to find and attack.
Air Force personnel will set up temporary shelters to house some of the base's recreational functions. But buildings are a precious commodity at Altus Air Force Base. Cleanup and rebuilding is still underway after last May's tornado, which claimed at least 2 structures. The Air Force has impaneled an executive board to come to Altus to investigate the fire. But regardless of their findings, it's going to cost more than $3.5 million to replace this building. Kurt Autry, Action 4, Altus Air Force Base.
The people who stand to lose the most from Penn Square Bank's failure were the most concerned about getting their money out. Depositors with accounts above $100,000 began lining up outside the bank an hour and a half before it opened for business. They knew that the government guarantees accounts up to $100,000, but they're not certain what will happen to the rest of their cash.
Well, I work for some companies that have quite a bit of money, over $100,000 invested here. And we're just going to see what happens, see if we can get any of it back.
Well, I have over $200,000 in that bank, and I'm down here to get $100,000 of it. And they tell us that we can get it today, then they'll give us I believe you call it a pink slip that will be accounts receivable. And as the bank liquidates and as they get their loans in, then we will receive, I understand, either all or a part of the balance.
There may have been a bank, but smaller customers who had to come inside the mall even longer line as they listened to federal banking officials who assured them that there was no need to panic.
I want you to be assured. I want you to get to your neighbors and tell them that FDIC is operating this bank. We've got $11 billion backing up your deposits.
The federal officials' promises failed to reassure most of these bank customers. Several hundred people elected to wait in line for up to 2 hours in order to clear out their accounts. Depositors we spoke with said they plan to handle their money differently in the future.
First of all, I'm going to get all the things that I've been denying myself. Like a ceiling fan in the breakfast room and new drapes for the living room, and just spend it.
I'll invest it with another bank, but I'll find out their assets and what their assets are and what they invest in.
The government has promised to keep the bank open 24 hours a day if necessary to handle all transactions. Judging by today's lines, the best time to withdraw your money might be 3 o'clock tomorrow morning. Scott Wallace, Action 4 at Penn Square.
The people who lived in this house lived through the Great Depression. They saw hard times. They also saw long lines, bread lines, soup lines, lines outside of banks. Many people fear that the closing of Penn Square Bank signals the closing of many others. In fact, a lot of people are remembering the Great Depression. This picture depicts a scene of chaos at a bank in New Jersey when the stock market fell. The same scene was probably repeated across the nation. Back then, there wasn't an FDIC to ensure you'd get your money back. Today, these people know they will get their money back, but it still has some shades of the Great Depression.
Well, this don't even look as bad as the soup line was then. This don't look so bad. Of course, the Depression, I didn't see any line to the bank because the bank was closed up. It wouldn't do you no good to go to the bank. They wouldn't let you in. You couldn't get no money like you can now.
During the Depression, there wasn't a booming oil business, and that's the problem. When the oil boom got off the ground, most oil companies operated on a healthy cash flow. But to expand, it takes money, and that's where the loans come in. Penn Square Bank took great pride in being a friendly bank, happy to give out a loan. A handshake and someone's word went a long way. As one oil man said, it was the good old boy way of doing business. Well, now some good old boys are in trouble.
There's hundreds of $1-million loans.
Dan King is an independent oil man who had a lot of loans at Penn Square Bank. He had established a solid line of credit. Now, since Penn Square Bank is no more, he has to start all over and make new friends with a new bank. He says the independent oil man is in a very frustrating position.
If the FDIC can let us know who we owe and where we owe it to, we can make our own. I think a lot of people can make their own adjustments, and we can try to solve this problem. If not, it's going to progress to the point where you'll see a tremendous amount of business failures simply based on lack of ability to adjust in time.
Now all people like Dan King can do is wait. Their fate is in the hands of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Bellishaw, Action 4.
Police have been investigating a lot of violence around Oklahoma City in the last few weeks. There are a lot of theories on the causes behind the violence. One theory is the summer heat. It suggests that summer violence is the result of tempers flaring and frustrations mounting because of the summer miseries. But many psychologists say there is little evidence to support that theory, although the heat may be one of several steps towards frustration. One counselor says the major cause of summer disruptions is a low self-image, and that is caused a lot of times by lack of activity.
Typically, it kind of cuts both ways. People who are more active tend to be people who have more energy, have more higher self-esteem. But on the other hand, people who become active kind of experience a rise in self-esteem.
Summer activity is one of the best ways to avert frustration. Doctors say to get involved in any kind of sport or other project, because even if a low self-image doesn't surface in violence, it can cause internal damage, both mentally and physically. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4.
So he does have to lift heavy objects. He's a mechanic, and we were fortunate to get an outstanding. To make sure that not the kind of an instrument that you can lose. It's not a needle in a haystack. These scissors are called the Oxner clamp, and they were left in his body, in his stomach, in his abdominal cavity, in a position more or less like this. That caused him all kinds of problems.
Ready, set, go!
Skydiver ground practice, more commonly known as dirt diving. Elmer and the glue bags will dirt dive a dozen times before their actual jump. They'll be graded on the number of formations they can perform during a 50-second free fall. The routine must be perfected on the ground.
It's not really defined, you know, it's kind of there's something here and there's something in the front.
Let's go in there and make a good four-way no-contact star. I'll give it a real good definition. All right. Check it out behind you.
Get down. The final call for Golden Knight.
The long, slow climb to altitude gives the jumpers plenty of time to contemplate their aerial acrobatics. Ground-bound photographers track the free fall with telescopic TV cameras. The action is recorded so that judges can count the number of formations each team makes. Elmer and the glue bags hope to link up 11 times while hurtling towards the ground at 120 miles per hour. If they do that, they'll have a good chance of winning the 8-member competition. But the glue bags have a handicap. Though each jumper is highly experienced, they've only jumped as a team for a short time. They hope their philosophy of taking things slowly will help them overcome that disadvantage. And in case you're wondering, for a skydiver, going to the glue bag means reaching deep inside himself and coming up with a new innovative maneuver, sort of like going to the well. If the 8 Elmers can stick together and get to the glue bag a few more times within the next 3 days, they could wind up national parachuting champions. Scott Wallace, Action 4 in Muskogee.
Where did he get this notice? Where did he get this information? Did the governor give it to him? Did someone else higher up out at the state capitol in the know give it to him? So I'm hoping that this is not true. But this came from a reliable source. Someone close to him did make this statement in South Oklahoma City last Friday that the election would be the 27th day of July.
I don't know when the election date's going to be. I hope it is the 27th or as quickly as possible.
Have you heard it might be the 27th?
I have heard that that's the first possible date that it could be, just figuring out mathematically based on the state law. I don't know that it's going to be the 27th. I don't have any idea.
Lloyd Rader is 75 years old. He became the Human Services Department Director 31 years ago, and under his direction, the department has grown to the largest agency in state government, giving Rader a power that has ensured him friends in state government as well as opponents. Problems came to a head a couple of years ago when state lawmakers felt the patriarch of the system was too powerful and wanted legislative oversight of departmental funds. That battle has not been resolved, and earlier this year the House nearly defeated the agency's appropriations for next year because the Senate had removed legislative oversight from the bill at the last minute.
We have failed in our objective established last year of legislative oversight. We have abandoned that principle. Make no mistake about it, if we pass out this committee report, we have abandoned our commitment.
But Rader's most recent problem stemmed from the charges of child abuse at state juvenile centers. Before a Senate committee in Washington, D.C., Rader twice denied the charges, but then admitted abuses had occurred, but said they were being corrected.
We're doing our very best to run good institutions. We do run good institutions. It's certainly sad and regrettable that some of these incidents have occurred.
Today's announcement that Rader will resign at the end of the year has nothing to do with the director's opponents or the controversies of the last few years, according to DHS officials. But whether this is a resignation or a retirement, the issues of legislative oversight and child care at state facilities will not be resolved when Lloyd Rader leaves office. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4.
Yesterday evening, Welfare Department attorneys had a choice. Either deliver two young adoptees to Special Judge Donald Manning or else go to jail. The case involved a messy adoption. Oklahoma City Attorney Jeannie Bauman and her husband Michael wanted to adopt a 3-year-old boy and his 2-year-old sister. Judge Manning granted the couple custody of the kids, but the Welfare Department refused to hand the kids over, saying it had already placed the youngsters with another family. This morning, DHS lawyers Tom Tucker and Pam Padley appealed Judge Manning's decision. They filed a flock of motions with the Supreme Court's clerk. The state lawyers contended that removing the youngsters from their trial adoptive home would hurt the process of forming new family ties and would not be in the children's best interests. After filing their appeal, the Welfare Department attorneys came here to the state Supreme Court to ask Chief Justice Pat Irwin for his help in keeping the attorneys out of jail. With Chief Justice Irwin's order firmly in hand, the Welfare Department attorneys returned to the clerk's office. The order temporarily suspends the lower court ruling. A hearing on the matter is set for Monday afternoon.
Justice delayed, they say, is justice denied.
The Bauman's attorney was not pleased with the latest development.
I'm disappointed. They've had their hearing in the trial court. They've had their hearing in the Supreme Court. They apparently think they don't have to obey the law.
McElwee says she'll file counter motions in the case as soon as possible. In the meantime, the two children will remain in their trial adoptive home in northern Oklahoma. Scott Wallace, Action 4 at the state capitol. The auditor's report shows that the Welfare Department bought 4 snapper lawnmowers like these in the spring of 1980. The mowers were used to trim grass around the Oklahoma Health Sciences Center. State records show that all 4 machines were ordered and delivered on the same date. The total purchase price was $1,160. But state law at the time the mowers were bought required competitive bids for all purchases in excess of $500. The audit concludes that DHS officials attempted to conceal the fact the purchase was split 4 ways in order to avoid competitive bidding. DHS officials disagree with the audit findings.
The audit report reflects that they were all delivered at the same time, and this definitely is not true. The vendor admits that he did not deliver them at the same time. The purchase receipts indicate they were not delivered at the same time. The one thing that the auditor is going on is the fact that the invoices were all dated the same date. And of course, we have the same question. Why were they all dated the same date? The vendor told us the reason they were dated the same date was in order to get a price break from the distributor or the manufacturer. And that's one of the reasons why he could sell them as low as he did.
State and local prosecutors have received copies of the audit so they can decide whether any criminal charges should be filed against DHS employees. Scott Wallace, Action 4 at the State Human Services Department.
The dispatch service of the Oklahoma City Fire Department is a critical operation. Getting the right fire crews to respond to an emergency at the right time takes concentration. The last thing they need during an emergency is interruptions. But interruptions are typical, especially with kids suffering from summer boredom.
If we have a serious fire, of course, any interruption is serious to us because we're monitoring all the radio channels and getting additional calls, reporting the fires, getting calls from the news media. It can be a serious problem in cases like that. Ordinarily, it's just bothersome to us. It irritates us a little bit, but during real emergencies, it can be a problem.
Another cause of interruption is the new speed dialing phone service. The one-touch dialing has led to a rash of accidental calls to the fire and police departments. That's something the dispatchers know they have to live with. And besides, if people are going to depend on the speed dialing during an emergency, it is at least comforting to know that the service works. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4.
Charlotte Kinsey and Cinda Pallet disappeared from the state fair almost 10 months ago.
and there's still no word on the girls' whereabouts. The months have been long and stressful for the girls' families and loved ones. They have spent hundreds of hours in search of the girls. They scouted the Oklahoma State Fair last September, held fund drives, phone banks, and a few weeks ago took their search to the State Fair in Knoxville, Tennessee. There, as on many other occasions, they handed out flyers in hopes that someone would have the information they longed for. The families are still hopeful, but they long to personally know the joy that the Dixon family feels.
For them, I felt joy. For myself, of course, I had a big lump, but I still think that we're going to find our girls.
Debbie Mash, Action 4.
Say within 30 seconds, 15% of that house was engulfed in flame back there. It just ignited. And the time the fire department was on it, the roof and everything was burning. I don't know how it, unless there's some combustible stuff in there that burned out, but it spread awful fast that first 2 or 3 minutes.
Oklahoma's economy and employment have grown with energy in the past years, but now figures show the growth has stopped with a jump in unemployment to 5.3% across the state. The jobless rate is highest in Oklahoma's southeast corner, where Pushmataha County registers more than 15% unemployed. The optimistic statistics are from the west, where agriculture is the predominant industry. When compared to the 9.8% national average, the Oklahoma jobless rate seems low. But 5.3% is not a good figure. And state officials blame the increases on a slump in the energy industry.
It's the national recession, which spills over into some industries in Oklahoma, and the recent market slump in oil and gas. We've had a major drop in the number of rigs active in the state, although we still show more employees in the mining industry than we did last year. The difference is being reduced, and the number has been falling the last few months.
State officials are hopeful that the energy industry will pick up again and pump up the state's employment figures. Traditionally, the state's employment figures are at their best during the fall months. But if the energy industry continues to sag, state officials may find that Oklahoma's employment picture has already peaked. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4 at the state capitol.
For the motorists who traveled down the extension, they probably didn't notice the sounds in the center of the bridge. Workers from the Department of Transportation are already busy repairing the deteriorating 20-year-old bridge. The project's completion date, 10 months from now. Workers will be repairing the bridge bit by bit, and traffic along the extension near 240 will be narrowed to one lane heading both north and south. If motorists insist on taking this route to and from downtown, they must be prepared to travel slowly. If they want to avoid this situation entirely, they should take an alternate route, such as Western, Eastern, Kelly, even I-35. Department workers did mention that apparently the message has been received about the repairs because they've already noticed a drop in the number of cars traveling through there. Bella Shaw, Action 4 at the Broadway Extension and I-240.
Her body was spotted by 2 rangers early in the evening, only 300 yards from where the collision occurred. Rangers have been searching for the body of 31-year-old Jeannie Evans for almost a week, first with divers and dragging equipment, and finally with shoreline patrols. They searched for almost 140 hours without any luck. Rangers believe the body was finally found because it had just surfaced. AmCare attendants helped the lake rangers load the body on the north shoreline and then brought it over to the main boat ramp. Attendants then took the victim to the medical examiner's office, where an investigation will be made to learn more about the cause of Jeannie Yvette's death. There is no word yet on whether criminal charges will be filed in connection with the two-boat collision. Lake officials say they'll finish their investigation early next week. Only then can charges be placed in what rangers are calling the worst boating accident in the 14-year history of the lake. Sherry Sellers, Action 4 at Lake Stanley, Draper.